Hi everybody. Due to the current situation with coronavirus, schools have switched to online teaching and students to online learning. I've been teaching online for years, and that's why I want to share with you these 5 tips on how to create the best online learning experience for your students. Let's go. Tip number 1. Choose the platform that works best for you and for your students, and of course for your school. Some things to keep in mind when you're choosing a platform to conduct your classes on are how many people can join one session at a time. Is the platform accessible from outside of China in case somebody is not in China currently? And is it mobile friendly? Tip number 2. Get a set of tools to make your work easier. Now that you're teaching online, you might want to consider mixing up online tools and offline tools. For example, getting an online notebook where you can invite your colleagues to join some of your boards or some of your notes, or maybe even inviting your students to join them would make your life much easier if you want to implement that aspect into your online teaching. I personally use Trello for that. And some other tools that you might want to consider are something that allows you to collect your students' opinions or answers in one place on one board, again, online at any time, not only during your class. I personally use Padlet for that, and for collecting homework, I use Trello. And of course, since most of these platforms and the whole learning experience is absolutely new to your students, to their parents too, you might want to put together a video guide on how to use these platforms. If the students need to register, how they can register quickly, and then what do they have to do with them, will be extremely helpful. Tip number 3, adapt your content to online learning. Now that your students are at home, they're very relaxed, they are on their couches, they get distracted very easily, you need to grasp their attention and keep it for as long as possible. By breaking down your content into smaller segments, you are basically helping your students to learn better. You can use 5 minutes to give them some new information and 5 minutes to give them some games, exercises, activities on that new information that you just gave them. Then again, you go into 5 minutes of information and 5 minutes into activities and exercising, or some tests or discussion and questions. So this kind of lecture versus interaction style will help you to switch their attention and keep it for those 5 minutes. Of course, you have to adapt the time to your student's age, but it works perfectly always. Now, what else we do here is ask as many questions as possible, more questions that you have ever asked in a classroom. By asking questions, you again grasp their attention immediately. You can also call out the names and then ask a question. So what happens is the student hears their name and they go like, wow, that's about me. I have to be listening. And you might not get the answers that you are expecting. Maybe they will not be correct, but it doesn't matter as long as you get your students into the discussion right away, or into thinking about the question and thinking about possible answers. So that's already amazing when it comes to online learning, that you can grasp that attention with the questions and then you can guide the students further. And one more thing that is extremely useful when it comes to adapting your content is adding your body language. It's more about creating your body language, actually. So make your own signs for each class. They might be the same or different, that would help the students to understand how to communicate with you if there is some kind of connection problem. For example, in my online classes, I use signs like this to signify that I understand, or I can hear you, or yes. And signs like this to understand that I cannot hear you or I do not understand what's happening. And this simple signs saves so much time when it comes to online learning, as well as create a much better connection between you and your students, because you have your own signals that help you to have more fun during the class as well. And they just work perfectly always. Tip number 4. Make a PPT to guide your students through the learning process. They don't always have the best connection. They might miss out on some words that you are saying. So having a PPT where you put up the key words or key questions, key concepts will help them to understand everything that's going on and reinforce, refresh some of the basic framework for your class. Another thing that you should do with your PPTs is add more graphs, more pictures. For example, when I introduce sustainable development goals to my students, I always use this picture. And when I talk about project management skills, I use this table that shows the students the process that they will be going through when learning about project management skills. That's how these PPTs make my teaching online much easier for me to manage my students, and it also makes it easier for the students to follow the content. Tip number 5, ask your students to take photos and pictures of the process of doing their homework or some activities that are connected to your online classes. The whole purpose of this is that in the end of the week or the month, you will put together all these pictures into a very nice big collage, and you might have tiny pictures there, it depends on how many pictures you get from your students, but you will be able to send it out to students, to parents, to your school, and basically it signifies all the work that you've been putting into this online learning experience together with your students. And students love that aspect of having something that will become something bigger than just one photo or just one class. And it also gives them a feeling of connection, some kind of a community building experience, which they usually love. So you can try to do it with your students, and you can also take pictures of yourself as you're preparing for classes, so that you can also add your pictures in there. And this is going to be an activity that makes it a bit more fun for the students and more fun for you as well. I hope these tips were useful. Thank you so much for listening.